Hey everyone, today I'm going to talk about Thomas Jefferson's election and administration, so his presidency essentially. In 1800, Thomas Jefferson is elected to be the third president of the United States. The two before him, I made another video about them, George Washington and John Adams, were Federalists, so that's their political party. But Jefferson was a Republican or a Democratic Republican. Sometimes they refer to him as a Jeffersonian or a Jeffersonian Republican, so just be aware of all those terms. This is the first transfer of power between political parties in U.S. history, and people were afraid it would cause a lot of problems. However, Jefferson reassured the American people in his inaugural address, saying that we are all Republicans and we are all Federalists. So he is essentially saying, I'm a president for everybody. I'm going to pause for just a second because I think that you deserve to meet my dog Lily, because you met Hendo earlier. So there she is. Lily, hi. The microphone's kind of in the way, but you get the idea. I think a good question to ask you about this time period is whether Jefferson did things during his presidency that were consistent with his political party's beliefs or inconsistent with his political party's beliefs. Meaning, did he actually follow through on all those ideas he had before he became president, or does he kind of go away from those a little bit? And surprisingly, he actually kept a lot of Federalist policies in place, which many people probably would have thought he would have overturned. I'm going to start first with things that are consistent with his political party. So things that he does that align with his political party's beliefs. We talked in the beginning of the year that Jeffersonian Republicans wanted a smaller central government, more states' rights, they were against high tariffs and the national bank, and supported more agricultural development. Well, during his term, Jefferson does cut down on military spending, so that is consistent with the political party beliefs. He reduces the number to only 2,500 officers and men. Can you imagine that as the military right now? This is consistent with his beliefs because he wanted to uphold the Republican ideals of a smaller government and not get involved in any major wars. He does repeal or get rid of the whiskey tax, the same one that led to the Whiskey Rebellion during Washington's presidency, and this does make his political party really, really happy, although it does add to the national debt because they have less tax revenue coming in. A big one is when he buys the land in the Louisiana Purchase from France. It actually adds more land for agriculture to expand, which would help his supporters who were mainly farmers. So that part is consistent, although there are some inconsistent parts about the Louisiana Purchase. And then there's the court case Marbury versus Madison. This is probably the most important Supreme Court case in U.S. history, so make sure you understand it very clearly. At the end of Adams' presidency, he appointed several judges called the Midnight Judges because he does it so last minute, and they are approved by the Senate. The only thing that left that they needed was for the commission to be delivered, which was like the official paper saying what their jobs were and that they could get started. Well, when Jefferson took over, he told James Madison to not deliver those papers because he didn't want more Federalist judges in the courts. Those are against his political party. William Marbury, one of these judges who were appointed, takes this to the Supreme Court. Everyone thought Chief Justice John Marshall, who was a Federalist, was going to allow Marbury to have his job. That makes sense because he's a Federalist, so just let Marbury take over. But instead, he says that the Judiciary Act of 1789, which was a law to allow the Supreme Court to rule in these situations, was unconstitutional because it gave the Supreme Court powers that the Constitution said it shouldn't have. So by coming to this decision, he actually gave the Supreme Court even more power, which is the power of judicial review. From now on, it will be the Supreme Court's job to decide if laws are constitutional or not. So the ruling in Marbury versus Madison essentially gives the Supreme Court more power because now they have the power of judicial review. Marbury versus Madison is consistent with Jefferson's political party because he tried to weaken the Supreme Court. Although it does lead to an inconsistent outcome, which is that it leads to the Supreme Court actually gaining more power. Okay, let's look at things that he does that are inconsistent with his political party. In 1803, Jefferson bought the land in the Louisiana Territory from France for $15 million. Jefferson, who believed in strict construction of the Constitution, actually believed the president didn't have the right to create this treaty and buy this land. He wanted to write an amendment or change the Constitution, but there was no time. So he finally agreed, even though it was against his principles. The land he bought more than doubles the size of the United States. So like I said earlier, this adds agricultural land, but he doesn't really believe that the president has the right to do this because the Constitution does not say so. So it is inconsistent with his political party beliefs, although probably a good decision in the sense of adding more land to the United States. The last inconsistency I want to discuss is the Embargo Act. In 1804, Jefferson was elected to a second term and had to deal with the European powers going to war. After Napoleon sold the Louisiana Purchase to the United States, he began to focus on a war with Britain. Well, this war was causing American merchant ships problems from both countries, and the British were impressing the U.S. sailors into their navy, which means they were capturing them and forcing them to serve or sit in a dungeon. This became so bad that between 1808 and 1811, 6,000 U.S. citizens were taken. The American people were outraged, as you can imagine, and Jefferson, who hated war, had to come up with a solution. He decided to pass something called the Embargo Act, which forbade any exports from leaving the United States. He felt that since both France and Britain rely on the goods that the United States was sending them, that they would eventually give in and come to a peaceful agreement. Unfortunately, this act hurt American businesses more than it hurt the European powers. In the north, they had piles of dead masts filling the harbor, and the docks were deserted except for the people doing illegal trade. And in the south, they had extra piles of cotton and tobacco that they couldn't sell anywhere else. Jefferson even had Congress pass a law to enforce the Embargo Act, which actually made Americans compare him to King George III. So this is completely inconsistent with his political party beliefs because he wanted a smaller central government, but now he's giving it more power, trying to enforce the Embargo Act. His Embargo Act actually hurt the American economy so much that they had to repeal it, but by this time it was the end of Jefferson's second term, and following in Washington's tradition, he decides to step down, and James Madison becomes the fourth president. The practice prompt that I'm going to give you this time is something that actually covers an earlier time period as well. It's a short answer question, and it's going to compare two different time periods with similar concepts. And this is something that you will see typically on short answer questions or even in long essay questions and DBQs, where you have to compare events across time periods or themes across time periods. In this case, you are comparing the Northwest Territory with the Louisiana Purchase. So as usual, try to answer the prompt and then check out the answers in the video's description. Hope you have a great day and enjoy your studying, and maybe take a break and watch a little bit of Harry Potter, but only a little bit because you have more studying to do. Hope you guys have a good day.